welcome to episode 57 of the Drunken Boxing Podcast, coming to you, as always, from the capital of the Middle Kingdom, Beijing. Alright, let's get into a little bit of Mushin martial culture news. Not a lot has been released since the last podcast release, because I've been quite snowed under with work that I've been trying to do, particularly for the online learning program. I have filmed and edited a very in-depth series of lessons on one of Xing Yi Quan's most important practice routines, which is called Ba Shi, Xing Yi Quan 八势, 8 posture, 8 form, or routine. And this was planned, filmed over many sessions of filming, and then of course it took a while to edit and compile. But I'm confident that it's, to date, probably the most in-depth instructional material on the subject that has ever been released. I can probably say that for any language. It's a series of lessons that covers the entire form, its background, its execution of each techniques, the classical names, the terminology, the explanation, the content of the routine is explained tactically and how it's connected, as well as how the applications connect to one another in the entire form. This is all available on the Huajin online learning program, as well as all our other programs that are on there, or rather lesson videos. The Huajin online learning program is a in-depth online program where you can learn Xing Yi Quan and Liang style Ba Gua Zhang, Hebei, Xing Yi Quan and Liang style Ba Gua Zhang. And unlike a lot of other online learning programs out there, the lessons are in-depth, highly detailed, and professionally filmed in 4K and edited. So it really does give you the ability to fully learn in a comprehensive and deep manner from wherever you may be. As mentioned, it covers both arts. You can focus on one or the other or both. The lessons are released sequentially. We've been running this program for 3 years plus. It has four lesson videos released every month. And with that, there's a huge existing library already released on the subjects of Xing Yi Quan and Ba Gua Zhang, including Neigong, Qigong, internal practices, Gongfa skill building practices, individual techniques. Applications are introduced, partner work, drills, partner forms, and of course core practices, forms, etc., and weapons too. So as time goes on and we go through the program, more and more content is being released. We're going deeper into these systems, and the goal is to introduce and present them in full. So you'd be able to learn the content of these two large systems from wherever you are. Ba Shi is one of the recent additions to the online lessons that are available. And with regards to Liang style Ba Gua Zhang, we've been going through the Lian Huan Zhang, the linking palms, which I also don't think have ever been released publicly to this depth in English, and also with the content. I think this might even be the first. Well, nonetheless, it's open, it's available to anybody to join. As I said, it's been running for a few years, it's going well, and if you're interested in learning these arts, go check it out. Now, to that end, on the Mushin Martial Culture YouTube channel, there have been 2 releases that came out since the last podcast episode, namely primer video on Fuhu Zhuang. Fuhu Zhuang being another post-standing practice, quite popular within Yi Quan, but it's also popular outside of Yi Quan. It's practiced within some Xing Yi Quan lineages and some other lineages as well that I've bumped into here and there that are not even Xingyi related or Yi Quan related, interestingly enough. The Subdue the Tiger or Fuhu Zhuang primer video will give you a basic overview so you can practice this on your own. And of course, I released a highlight video for the series of Ba Shi, the 8 forms lessons that are released on the Patreon online learning program, the Huajin online learning program. So check it out. If you're interested in joining, the online learning program is the Huajin tier. It's at patreon.com/Mushin Martial Culture. It's the Huajin tier. But also there are 2 other support tiers there. Those support tiers help me to continue to bring you quality content on our YouTube channel, the Drunken Boxing Podcast, and all the other endeavors that I do. So if you're able to, give us a bit of support there. Additionally, go check out our website. I try to update it from time to time, expanding on it. I try to go in adding whatever's new with the YouTube section. That needs to be updated, but it will be. There's also information you can find about my teacher, about the online program, about myself, etc. And the online store, where I'm constantly trying to find materials or equipment and things that I myself like to train with. Most notably, I've made available traditional hard steel swords and weaponry that are not generally available. You usually get floppy things, as well as traditional training tops, clothes, shoes, etc. And of course, apparel, which I design. Usually try to make something that is interesting, that represents the art, your love for the art, etc. Hoodies and t-shirts. And this is one way you can also support this podcast and the programs that we do. So check it out. That's mushinmartialculture.com. Of course, my book, Dragon Body, Tiger Spirit, is available directly there as well as on Amazon. All right, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Dan Miller. Now, Dan Miller might be familiar to many of the people that have been involved in Xing Yi Quan, and particularly Ba Gua Zhang from older days in the 90s, etc., because he was the founder and editor of the Pa Kua Journal, the Ba Gua Zhang Journal, which was one of the first, or probably the first, dedicated publication on Ba Gua Zhang available in English. And he did this way back when most people didn't know Ba Gua Zhang was martial art. It was not on everybody's lips. But apart from that, he himself is a Chinese martial artist who practiced Xing Yi Quan, Ba Gua Zhang, and Taiji Quan. Due to his studies, traveling to Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland China, he would also interview older masters, etc., which you can see in the Ba Gua Zhang Journal. Now, the Ba Gua Zhang Journal was like, when I was looking for them when they were coming out, they were hard to get, especially where I was in the world. If you came across issues, you would treasure them and collect them. I still have my entire collection of all of the issues that I had subsequently he released on a CD that you could purchase. But it was a real treasure trove, so his contribution cannot be understated. But more than that, I wanted to get his background, his views on practice, his experiences, etc., traveling to these places, practicing the arts, and what he's doing now. And we get into all of that in this podcast. He's also deeply involved in bluegrass music. He is involved in a publication regarding that as well. So art, martial art and musical art. Nonetheless, I don't want to ruin too much. We get into all of that in the interview. So without further ado, I give you Dan Miller. Welcome to the Drunken Boxing Podcast, Mr. Dan Miller. Very happy to be talking to you today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, no, the pleasure's all mine. I've known about you and your works for many, many years, as I think anybody who was in the West that practiced Xingyi and Ba Gua, but particularly Ba Gua Zhang, mostly because of your massive contribution at a time that there was no such thing, which was the Pa Kua Chang Journal, which is the Ba Gua Zhang Journal, which was really groundbreaking for its time. It gave access to information that was not only missing in all Chinese martial arts, but on a style that was relatively unknown in the West at that time. And for me, that was one of the interesting things and why I really wanted to talk to you, because I wanted to get a little bit of insight into your background, your history, and then what led you up to that point. So maybe you can go ahead and give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself, and we can get into all of that.
Well, in relation to martial arts, I didn't really start studying martial arts at all until I was in my early 20s. I did a lot of sports when I was a kid, the typical Western sports, baseball, basketball, football. I was on the swimming team, all that kind of thing. And then when I got into high school, I ended up being a long-distance runner throughout high school and college. Mm-hmm. I did pretty well running in high school, and I got recruited to run at the United States Naval Academy, and I went to college there and ran on their track and cross-country team as a long-distance runner.
Oh, wow.
When I was a senior, I got stress fractures in my shins, and that was disappointing. And kind of put a halt on my running career. But I always enjoyed that long distance running, that that zone that you get into when you do repetitive motion like that. And that when I couldn't run anymore, I tried biking and I tried other things, but I couldn't. I tried sitting meditation. I just couldn't get anything to get in that zone. And one of my biking partners said, "Hey, have you ever tried Taiji or Qigong?" I'm like, "What is that? I never heard of it." Mm-hmm. And so I started researching that, and martial arts, after I graduated from the United States Naval Academy, I got a commission in the Marine Corps. And so being in a Marine Corps officer, martial arts appealed to me at that point because I thought maybe it would save my life, or I could save the life of somebody else at some
Sure.
point. You never know when you're in the military, you never know where they're going to send you or what kind of situations you'll be in. So that kind of appealed to me, that side of it at that point as well. And, you know, I had been on some, different educational things while I was at the Naval Academy. I went to Hawaii during my summer before my senior year, and I trained with some Force Recon Marines, and I had the opportunity to do some training with some UDT SEALs, and that sort of opened my eyes to what my life could be like as a military officer. And so that's another reason why the martial arts appealed to me. So in about 1983, I graduated college in 82, and this was about 1983 that I started exploring Tai Chi and Qigong and Ba Gua. I was in the military, so I moved around a lot. Every 2 or 3 years, I was stationed somewhere new. So wherever I went, I'd try to find the best teachers I could find, and I'd always ask, well, what are you best at? And so if the guy said, well, my best thing is Xingyi, then I'd study Xingyi with him. Or if he said, my best thing's Ba Gua, I would do Ba Gua. So that's kind of how I ended up moving around a lot and studying with a bunch of different teachers and studying Xingyi, Taiji, and Ba Gua, and doing, of course, Qigong along the way as well.
Sure. And at that time, I don't know how much, for sure, Taiji Chuan was, becoming more and more available in the States. But of all those teachers that you met and bumped into, how many were actually doing styles like Ba Gua Zhang and Xing Yi Quan?
Not very many. The first teacher I studied with I did Taiji because, like you said, I got stationed in California at some point, and California Taiji, it was not hard to find a Taiji teacher in California, so I did that out there. But when I started studying a little bit of Ba Gua here and there, I found a few teachers in California, and that kind of appealed to me. Being a long distance runner, walking around the circle kind of appealed to me, that movement,
Sure.
that motion. And so in about 1989, I was stationed in Washington, D.C. area. I started studying Xingyi with a guy named Ken Fish, who had
Right.
studied with Zhang Junfeng in Taiwan. And then I was studying Taiji with a guy named Christopher Pei. Um, and I was studying Ba Gua with a guy named Park Bok Nam. In,
Christopher Pei, is he not the guy that's married to that ex-Beijing
yeah,
team?
Zhang Guifeng is his wife,
That's
and
right.
she was on the Beijing Wushu team back. I think Jet Li was one of her teammates.
Yeah,
Uh,
my wife was actually in the team as a
oh,
very
good.
young athlete at that time. So yeah, they know each other as well.
Yeah, Christopher Pei's wife was Zhang Guifeng, and she was on my first trip to China. I went with Christopher Pei and his wife, and she was very instrumental in introducing me to some important Ba Gua people in Beijing because she knew people.
Of
She was
course.
connected.
Yeah. And she's a
And
different generation as well because that early generation of the professional athletes, actually the team would bring in traditional, like legitimate traditional teachers to teach them stuff, even
yeah,
though it had a specific goal. Their goal was to
sure,
compete with it, but they brought
yeah,
in legitimate experts, unlike today where they just make things up and I don't know. But, back then it was a different case.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I was in DC. I was studying. I think I did Xingyi 2 nights a week with Ken Fish and Taiji 2 nights a week with Christopher Pei, and then I did Ba Gua every Saturday with Park Bok Nam.
Right. And Park is a yin stylist, a
Yes,
Korean
he is.
derived yin stylist.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting. He's also one of the early guys that actually made Bagua's name, somewhat well known or openly known in America. One of the earlier teachers that when you heard of Bagua in some way, it might have been through something that Park Bok-nam had either a student of his or he himself had published, etc. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite interesting. There was a student that that was training with my teacher here in Beijing, I'd say, 12 years ago. And he was an American who had moved here for some period of time. And his background was he was a student of Pak Bok Nam's, and then he wanted to carry on. So we used to train together. He actually used to train quite a lot. We used to go during the weekday mornings to my teacher. So it was usually just be me, him, and my teacher. Because most of the other locals work during the week, so they'd only come on the weekends. But yeah, he was a nice guy, and he gave a little bit of he wasn't much of a talker, so he gave little bits and pieces of his background and his life and his training with Pak Bok Nam, but it was all very positive.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed the time I spent training with Park, and of course, as you probably know, I helped him write 2 books on his fundamental Ba Gua training.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have those books somewhere, but yes, I have those books. So it was Ba Gua that drew you in, and it's very interesting that it was running that got you into that feeling of that like kind of movement, flow, meditative state. I used to supplement when I was much younger and I was competing professionally. I used to supplement obviously my training with, I had to do road work just to build up cardio. So I would run a good, between 5 and 10 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles, unfortunately, every 2 days. And part of the addiction was literally what you just said, getting into that rhythmic breathing kind of flow state, tempo, actually. There's a tempo with your feet and your breathing and the whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
And it puts you in a state.
Does.
Yeah. So then from there, how did you want to go? I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons you wanted to go deeper into Ba Gua. So, how did you get into starting, I feel like writing a journal or publishing a journal?
Well, I was studying with this guy in California that was teaching Ba Gua, and this was early on in the days of desktop computers, and I had bought a really nice computer and printer because I was in graduate school. I was studying electrical engineering in graduate school in Monterey, California at the Naval Postgraduate School. I was still in the Marine Corps at the time. And, I said, well, I can put out a little newsletter for you if you want. And he said, well, if you do that, I'll trade you some lessons. And so I started publishing that newsletter. But then I was only there a couple of years, and then I moved. And since I moved, I wasn't studying with that guy anymore. I didn't want to do his newsletter, but we had some subscribers to it. And I thought, why don't I turn this into more of a general Ba Gua newsletter about Ba Gua from everybody? And just about that time, they were having a Ba Gua teachers conference in Houston, Texas at a Gong Fu tournament. And I went down there, and I wasn't a teacher at the time, but I asked the guy that was leading the whole event. I said, hey, do you mind if you give me a couple minutes just to talk to everybody? And he said, sure. So I went in there and said, my name's Dan Miller. I've been publishing this little newsletter. I'd like to make it more of a all-inclusive newsletter about Ba Gua in general. Would you guys support me if I did this? And all of them, said they would, send me articles or, sit for interviews. And so I was pretty encouraged. There's probably about 20 some Ba Gua teachers there at this conference. And so that's what got me started. And at first I called it the Ba Gua newsletter. And it wasn't very big. It was like 12 or 16 pages. And I started interviewing all the Ba Gua teachers from around the country. I did a phone interview with Liu Xinghan in Beijing, and because he was on in the first issue.
Of course.
And then I
was that a connection through John Bracey?
Yeah, I knew John Bracey, and there was a student in Seattle that named Zhang Jie who had studied in Beijing with Liu Xinghan, and so he actually did the interview for me. And was translated the interview. And so then, I published that, and then I just started going around the country and interviewing different people who taught Ba Gua, and that the early issues were that. And then after I started the newsletter, a lot of people would write to me and say, hey, we like this newsletter. Why don't you do some books on Ba Gua too? And, going to the United States Naval Academy, I had a commitment to the service for 5 years. And then I went to graduate school, I had another commitment. And at about that time, my commitment for graduate school was ending. And I thought, well, I'll get out of the Marine Corps and just pursue this publishing thing. Right. And so after 10 years as an officer in the Marine Corps, I left the Marine Corps to pursue publishing. And that's when I started. I changed the name of the Ba Gua newsletter to the Ba Gua Journal. And then I started putting out books and just started the whole publishing thing at that point. That was in 1992. But my first trip to China was in 1991 with Christopher Pei and his wife and a group of Taiji students. And that's when I met Li Ziming. That's when I met Sun Jun. Right. That's when I met Sun Jinyun. All those people.
They were still around.
Yeah, they were still around. And, Chris's wife helped me make those connections on my first trip to Beijing. So that was really great to meet those people. And then, of course, every time I went to China, I met with Sun Jinyun because she was just such a wonderful person, as Tim Cartbell and you discussed on his podcast that, she was just a delight to be around. Yeah. And one of the things we put out was a translation of Sun Lutang's Xingyi book, and I interviewed her a bunch of times about her dad Xingyi and about his life and all that kind of stuff. So I always loved visiting with her every time I went to China.
Your translation or your publication of the Xing Yi Quan or Sun Lutang's study of Xing Yi Quan, under which label was that published? Because I think there's a couple versions currently available in the.
Ours was done by my publishing house, which is called High View Publications, and It was translated by an older Chinese guy here in the United States named Albert Liu.
Okay, that's the one I have.
Yeah, Albert Liu and his wife Jane Yao were both martial arts practitioners, and Albert had been a translator in China, translating English to Chinese and vice versa. And so I had met him, and he was looking for something to do, so I hired him to translate that book.
Well, that's another one of the very early, English resources on Xing Yi Quan and Ba Gua Zhang were so few and far between back then that in addition to the Ba Gua Journal, that version, that publication from Highview, your publication of Sun Lutang, was basically one of the only books available on the topic of Xing Yi Quan that had any depth and was easily, you could get it. It was I don't think I know any practitioner of Xing Yi Quan from back then, Westerner, that took the art seriously that didn't have a copy of that book on in their possession. So yeah, I mean these are little things that people today kind of take for granted, especially with the ease of access to information. The internet, you get things at the touch of a finger. You don't have to. But back then it was a hunt. I mean, I remember having to drive to obscure bookshops that might have something, or that you heard had 3 Kung Fu books, and you didn't even know what they were. But it was a 2-hour drive away, and you'd go there, and you'd get there, and it maybe you're lucky it's something that you want, and maybe you're not lucky, but you buy it anyway because you've driven all that way. So nowadays you just Google everything and you get more information than your brain can handle, and half of it is crap. But anyway. Yeah,
I know. I did the same thing. I hunted down books everywhere, and every time I went to China, I went to every Chinese bookstore and just looked for anything that was on Xingyi, Ba Gua, or Taiji and bought it up. And it was a hunt, especially, all the photos that we used in the journal. Man, I hunted high and low and hard for all those photos. Anybody I met with in China, I'd say, do you have any pictures of your teacher or your Kung Fu uncles or whatever? And I had a camera with a wide angle lens, and they would show me the pictures, and I'd just go real close to them with my camera and take photos of their photos. And that's how I got all those photos that we put in the Ba Gua Journal over the years.
That's another thing that people seem, in the West don't understand, is that generation, my teacher's generation and his teacher's generation, etc. It's only the more recent generations, but my teacher's generation and the older generations that you were dealing with, cameras were a major luxury. So when you say, like, when I asked my teacher, he doesn't have a million photos. He doesn't, because firstly, they didn't have money. Secondly, that generation cameras were rare. If you remember, like, back in the the good old days of the regime over here, you couldn't buy foreign products without a ticket. You had a ticket system that would allow you to, get access to rice, for example. That's how much rice you can get. Never mind going to the foreign import store to get something. So cameras are few and far between. And I remember, I mean, you took photos of your teacher's photos. My teacher's photos, that he's got a couple of really good habits. One, he's always kept a diary his entire life.
Oh,
So
nice.
he's got a few bookshelves full of daily diaries, and it includes all his time training. So
Oh, good.
everything is in there. The second thing, he actually managed to preserve his photos as best as possible. So what I did was, when I got to look at all his photos, I said, "Can I scan these?" And I used to have a scanner, and he said, "Yeah." And I took all of his photos home and just scanned whatever we had. And a lot of them were these tiny, tiny black and white photos that are like 1 inch wide. I'm sure
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
was
so
the majority of them were that. That's all they could
Yeah.
really print. That's
Right.
that's all they could get their hands on. So, with a high resolution scanning that I used to do very slowly, I could at least blow them up a little bit bigger digitally, and we can see them and preserve them. But what you did as well is a form of preservation for. It's really odd though, because the Chinese don't. I don't know if you noticed this, but they don't really value those things in the same way we do. For them, that's
Okay.
their teacher. They
Yeah.
they know who they trained with. They have the history of training with these people every single day.
Yeah.
We kind of value the physical evidence a lot more than they do, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting. So a lot of the time you'll see these teachers actually not take care of their photos, and that's it. Then the photos of those people are gone forever. And if you
Yeah.
do an internet search today, half of the photos you find are either very low grade, low resolution images, or just terribly maintained, and that's it. They're gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I would dig through all the. There was a martial arts magazine from Taiwan, and there was another one there in mainland China that I got. I went to their home office and bought back issues of all of their copies and would scour the magazine articles for old photos as well.
right. Yeah, my teacher gave me his full collection of all his old magazines of
Oh, nice.
Wuhun, martial
Yep.
spirit, and
Yep.
Zhonghua
That's the one.
Wushu, But
Yep.
Wuhun, I think I had everything that he had. He gave it all to me, going
Yep.
back to, like, must have been, the mid 80s or so. So, and a bunch of them I kept, and a bunch of them I just gave to my Kung Fu brothers, because he gave me
Okay.
first choice, and then I just gave the rest away. But they were a lot. But yeah, those are interesting things. The other day I sent my Shigu, my martial art, Li Ziming's daughter, Li Xuren. I sent her a photo that I found online. I don't even
Huh.
recall from where, of her father, Li Ziming, my grand teacher, doing a Tui Mo Zhang, a millstone pushing palm pose in front
Uh-huh.
of the Nine Dragon Wall. You know that
Uh,
famous Nine Dragon Wall in
yep.
Beihai Park? Yeah.
Yep.
And I sent it to her because it was the first time I'd seen it, so I just sent it to her on WeChat. We chat on WeChat, and she's like, "I've never seen this photo before,"
Ah.
and that's his daughter. It's
Yep. Yep. It's nice.
yeah. So it's nice when you find little things like that.
Yep.
So did you publish the journal through Highview? I mean, was that already the publishing house that was publishing the journal?
Yeah, that's a publishing house I started
Right.
myself to do the journal and to do the books. Yeah.
And why the name Highview, if I can ask?
I have a cabin in the mountains of West Virginia, and it's near a town called Highview, West Virginia, and I just thought
Ah.
that was an interesting name.
I was thinking more something along the lines of Ba Gua, where you push your bai hui up, the crown of your head up, and you're
No,
you're supposed to have this energy of your head penetrating the clouds, so you've got a high view of everything. So I thought maybe.
I wish it was that romantic, but it was just the name of a town that I was close to.
And did you obviously you started on your own, but did you eventually have a team of people that were helping you out with this project?
Not really.
No.
I had a lot of people that did help me. They weren't like official employees. Of course, Ken Fish, Bill Tucker, Tim Cartmel, those guys did a lot of translation work for me. They were invaluable. I couldn't have done it without the work they did, not only translating written material, but helping me with phone conversations. All of those guys speak Chinese very well.
Yeah.
They all spent a long, long time living in Taiwan, so they were extremely helpful in that way.
Right. I've got a similar, I do a lot of things. I try to do a lot of little things from writing stuff to making videos to translating to try to promote, and this podcast included.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm a little bit of a fickler in the sense that I have rather high demands, so I find myself not, even if somebody assists me with something, I usually end up doing it myself simply because I was kind of, I remember my dad telling me something when I was growing up always. He said, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And that kind of stuck with me throughout my life. So Are you interested in learning authentic traditional Chinese martial arts of Xing Yi Quan and Ba Gua Zhang? Well, if that's the case, the Huajin Online Learning Program is for you. The Huajin Online Learning Program is the premier distance learning program where you can learn authentic arts of Hebei Xing Yi Quan and Liang style Ba Gua Zhang in a comprehensive and in-depth manner from wherever you are. Featuring over 120 in-depth lessons covering aspects of individual training, technique refinement, forms, application, partner work, conditioning, internal skill building and qigong, and much more. The Huajin Online Learning Program has been running successfully for over 3 years and is highly praised by participants within the program. So start your journey into learning authentic classical Chinese martial arts today by visiting mushinmartialculture.com to find out more or to sign up directly at patreon.com/mushinmartialculture. That is the Huajin Online Learning Program. Enroll today. But yeah, I mean, it's great that you had great people like Tim and Ken that had all these skills and abilities to help out with it.
Yeah, and every time I traveled to China, usually I'd go to Taiwan first, and one of those guys, either Tim Cartmel or Bill Tucker, would usually accompany me to mainland China to be my translator there. So that was always very helpful, and of course, it was great to have those guys along.
Of course. Yeah, like I said, you were here at a time when some of the great older generations, the kind of connection between the past and the present were still around.
Yeah, I was very lucky to be there at that time. And then I was very lucky also because, as Tim Cartmel told you, I think in his interview, all these guys really wanted to talk to me. They kind of wanted to be featured in the journal. And so it's not that easy to get access to some of these guys, but because I had the journal and because I think it's because they thought it was kind of dying out in China, and they thought, well, maybe, this is a way to keep it going. These Americans seem interested in it,
Yeah.
I think that's why they were very eager to talk to me. And, I'd go to one of them's house, like we went to Shei Pei Chi's house, and half a dozen other guys he'd invited, other teachers he'd invited over to meet me too, like Yang Kun and Zhang Baoyang. That's where I met him at Shei Pei Chi's house. And so it was, once the ball got rolling, it was not hard for me to meet people because they wanted to introduce me to their friends. And Liang Kachun was extremely helpful. He knew lots of people, and he would take me to see a lot of people that he thought I'd be interested in talking to. I met Gao Ziying through Liang Kachun, and a lot of other people like that. And of course, Vince Black and I traveled together to China a lot, and he was tied in with Li Ziming's family. That's where I met your teacher. And Tom Bizio told you about the night we went out to dinner with your teacher, Di Guoyong, and it was a memorable night. It was me and Tom Bizio and Vince Black and Chris Quayle and Bill Tucker and Di Guoyong, your teacher. It was a lot of fun.
I was talking to I've got a martial arts brother here. He's Irish, but he's been here for probably 15 years as well. And he's trained with me and my teacher for about 7 years, 8 years going on now. And we were talking yesterday because we train every Sunday morning together. And we were talking yesterday about, just our experiences and the attitudes of, mainland teachers, etc., particularly newer generations. But even if you go back to the generation of my teacher and the attitude differences in between them. And one of the things that is interesting is my teacher's attitude to being very open and being very down to earth. Now, part of that is his nature. I mean, he is like that. But one of the things I must say that I think it really shaped his worldview and attitude on Chinese martial arts was, in fact, interaction with foreigners, which he luckily had a lot of from those early days. And it's like interactions like with Vince and your group, etc., that really, because a lot of the Chinese teachers here, they're so isolated and insulated from international mentality and culture.
Right.
And then they get old and they're really set in those ways and they don't understand another way. So they might have all the skill in the world, they might have all the knowledge in the world, but there are certain qualities that are different to the Western approach and in certain regards that kind of holds it back. And I think one of the key points that not only shaped my teacher's attitude, but also pushed his direction to do as much as he did. Because, I mean, he's done a lot in terms of promotion and teaching in multiple languages, but also domestically in certain aspects that I don't think it would have been the same had he not had that boom of the Westerners that had his interaction with. I mean, you guys are one group that the Americans in the group from especially Vince Black, etc., is one that he talks about often. But following this was he would be called, and oddly enough, I don't know how this started. I actually want to pick his brain a little bit about this because he used to be called to Russia by 2 or 3 groups at least once a year. I don't know where the interaction or the initial meeting came with these differing groups. It could have been through Li Ziming at that time. I'm not too sure about it, but and that I think these kind of things really, they're actually pretty good for especially that generation that went through all the hardships that they went through. Chinese to really preserve the arts.
Yeah, that's Liang Kechuan took us out to Chen Tinghua's family village. Talk about different, man. That was way out in the country, no running water, no electricity. Those guys, man, that was an interesting trip. Sharing some Ba Gua stuff with the guys that were practicing there because they were very isolated.
It's a culture shock. I think people don't realize what true Chinese life is like. You come to the cities, you're like, oh, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, this is China, I love it. But if you want to see how the majority of Chinese people lived and how they lived for the majority of Chinese history, go to the villages and
you went out there.
You'll see it.
I'm sure that it would have been the same for 1,000 years because again, there was no modern conveniences there at all.
Right.
Pretty amazing.
I went to my teacher's home village where he was born before he moved to Beijing young, but his home village is in Hebei. And it's basically the county or the area that Chuojiao Fanzi really disseminated and originated from, right? So Wu Binlou and those generation of people, they all come from that area. And the village and the area is still pretty deep with their Chuojiao Fanzi practice. So they had a gathering because there was a commemoration a big stele unveiled there for the names of the original people that started to disseminate Chuojiao Fanzi, which became such a major style in northern China. And I went through to the village for a thing because my teacher is currently in Australia. He hasn't been able to come back for a bit of time, and they needed him to go because he was one of Wu Binlou's students as well. And he told me to go represent him there, and I went there. It was sometime last year. And again, there were a couple of foreigners that were called. I have no idea how these other foreigners got called, but they seem to be exchange students at Hebei University. And I think there's a martial arts club at Hebei University, and they heard about the Chuojiao gathering, and they're like, well, this will be good for the foreigners to see. And I mean, these are like first year foreigners that have just arrived in China. They have no idea what they're going to expect, and then they come to see real village life. I mean, I think half of them were shocked just by the toilets, never mind everything else that was going on there.
Right.
Yep. But it was a great gathering, and you see everybody in the village, like absolutely all the kids do Chojiao Fanzi. They all practice in some
Oh,
form
that's
or
cool.
another. And that
That's
was really
nice.
nice to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how did you actually get around to distribution back then? I mean, there must have been a million problems to solve with your journal.
Well, I just I think it was word of mouth that people started to hear about it, and I tried to get the word out as much as I can. I can't remember if maybe I took a little ad out in Inside Kung Fu magazine or something like that to just let people know about it. And then, I did everything by hand. I went to a printer to have the pages printed, but I folded them and stapled them and
Mm,
got them out in the mail and did all that myself. It was out of necessity because I really wasn't making enough money to afford to pay anybody to do any of that stuff. I just had to do it all by myself. But
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, word of mouth back then, especially, yeah, like we were saying, because of a lack of information back then, and especially on topics like this, I'm sure that word of mouth and the eagerness of the people that actually knew about the styles or practiced the style, I'm sure everybody who could have heard about it and had the ability to purchase it would have gone out of their way to
yeah.
get their hands on it.
And I
So
interviewed pretty much everybody who was teaching Ba Gua in the United States at that time. I
yeah.
pretty much interviewed all of them. And of course, then their students would find out about it because I interviewed their teacher. And so I think that helped spread the word as well.
Yeah, and what was the community like back then? Were they a lot more cordial and united than they are today?
You know what? I don't even know what's happening today. When I stopped publishing the journal, I sort of stepped out of the public life of martial arts and just went to practice on my own and
Right.
just didn't, I haven't really interacted with anybody in that world other than my good friends like Tim Cartmel and Tom Bizio. And my teacher Vince Black. I studied Xingyi with Vince for a long time, and I went to see him and communicate with the guys I was close to. But as far as following what everybody else was doing and all that, um, I
Mm.
never really did that. And then, when the internet popped up and people would be arguing with each other on these forums, I just didn't want to be any part of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
it's kind of part and parcel of firstly, the internet, and secondly,
Yeah,
the martial arts. I mean, like, as united as even the community is here in general, they're not as united in terms of opinions. Everybody's got an opinion. Unfortunately, the bad side of the internet is that, well, the good side is that we have ease of access to information. The bad side of it is that everybody has an opinion that can be shared, and they feel there's no repercussions for sharing it any way they want to, so they just do whatever. They wouldn't have done that in public or in person. But on the
yeah.
internet, it just seems to bring the worst out. So,
Well, I did at some point. I tell you what, I did that Ba Gua Journal for 7 years, and I'd studied really hard for a number of years before that. So, after 10 years of going to China and collecting all that information and interviewing all those people, I had lots of video, I had lots of audio tape interviews, I had lots of notebooks full of stuff, and I just thought, man, I just need to practice because
yeah.
I gathered all of this information and I had it in my head, but it wasn't in my body.
Yeah.
And I said, I just need to step away from all this information gathering and try to assimilate this stuff. And so I just, I moved to a mountain area in Virginia and I bought 10 acres of land and I just practiced myself. I had kids. I started publishing a guitar magazine, and with my martial arts, I just practiced by myself and really didn't interact with many other people because I just wanted to take some time and sort of kind of assimilate all of this information I'd gathered.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the value of martial arts. A lot of times people get kind of confused with collecting information and think that the same as developing skill from that information. You're supposed to develop skill from it. The practice is supposed to be inside you.
Yeah, and I was I was tired of talking about it. I just wanted to do it really because because the internet wasn't a thing yet. All of these people that like to talk about it would be calling me at my office
Oh no.
and they want to be telling me about their teacher and how great he was, and they wanted to tell me about how everybody else's teacher was terrible. And I just got tired of it. I just got tired of everybody spouting off their opinion about this and that. And so I said, everybody can argue amongst themselves. I'm just going to go practice.
Well, I think you did the right thing. I wanna ask you. I mean, I'm continuing. You did the Ba Gua Zhang Journal, if I remember. It was 1990 to 97. I think that includes the period of the newsletter.
Yes.
So, all right, yeah. Of course, I personally I bought the CD, so I have all of all the issues, and I hate digital. I'm very old school like that. Unfortunately, I don't like digital books. I don't like I like physical copies. Books particularly, I like to have books in print. So I printed them. Actually, I printed them here. I had them printed out and bound here. So I've got all of the journals in print and bound in my bookshelf. So the world can go to hell in a handbasket. I have a library that's big enough to keep me. I can reread all my books. I have a record of everything. I think that's more valuable than anything else if they're in physical form. But what was it like? You obviously weren't a professional publisher. So what was it like learning and going through all the hurdles? There must have been a million mistakes along the way. I know myself. I just published a book, and I decided to get it all done myself, and I learned a lot through all of this. And similar to you, I didn't have the money to get people to do X, Y, and Z, so I ended up doing almost everything myself. I had a bit of help from my martial sister, Andrea Falk, who's got so much experience, and she helped me proofread and helped me set the print file, etc. She was so helpful. But you learn a million things along the way. And what was that like?
Well, it was just, flying by the seat of my pants. I got some books on self-publishing, and I read those, so I knew some of the details about getting a barcode and getting a ISBN number and getting registered with the Library of Congress and all those details like that. I learned along the way. And, the rest of it, like I said, I had bought the first Macintosh computer from Apple that came out, I bought, and I thought, I bought this thing. Now what am I going to do with it? And so I started, just tinkering around with, desktop publishing type stuff, and just kind of learned along the way. It was all new at that point in time. And I don't know if you have ever seen a magazine called Chi Magazine that was published by Steve Rhodes. Well, Steve was a good buddy of mine, and he lived, when I was living in Virginia, he lived pretty close to me. And so I would go over to his house, and he was really savvy in the world of printing because he had worked at a print shop from a young age. And so he taught me a lot about, and he was very knowledgeable about when desktop, computer printing and all that came along. He was very knowledgeable about all that. So he was very helpful. And I actually worked in his office for a little while when I first got out of the Marine Corps. His Chi Magazine office, I worked there. I did some book reviews and things like that for him. So, he taught me some stuff. So, it was just learning along the way kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that's the best way, and I think that it kind of makes full circle. I think a lot of the time, Chinese martial artists, we kind of over the years get ingrained with this do-it-yourself attitude, and learn to do-it-yourself attitude. So I think that's beneficial in endeavors like this. So it's not impossible to do. Yeah, there's a lot of things to learn and a lot of work to do, but it's not impossible to do on your own. And, just be meticulous and you'll be able to do it. So.
Just go dive in and do it. And, the world we're in, nobody's making a lot of money, so you got to do things yourself.
Exactly so.
My whole life is a lie.
Are floppy Chinese swords getting you down? Do you practice traditional Chinese martial arts but have difficulty locating and sourcing firm, solid steel training swords? Well, look no further. Available now on the Mushin Martial Culture online store are high-quality, custom-made, hard steel traditional training swords. Made from the highest quality materials, these swords have both the feel and weight distribution of traditional, authentic Chinese martial arts swords, featuring high-quality scabbards as well as the option to include a historically accurate handle wrap. This sword is built to last. Head on over to the Mushin Martial Culture online store to order yours today. Available as well on the store are other items, apparel, training shoes, and other unique Chinese martial arts merchandise. The URL is mushinmartialculture.com. Ditch the tin foil and get yourself a sword you can be proud of. It's similar with my study of doing graphics, like graphic design. I never went to a formal course for that. I was like, I need to make graphics. How do I use this program?
Sure.
Let me just play with it over the years. Same with video editing. I need to make a video. Play with it. It's
Exactly.
you get better at it. Now we're now almost. You published from 1990 to 97. We're almost 30 years following the conclusion of the journal.
Right.
And in that period of 30 years, was there anything else that you martial arts related? We'll get into your other endeavors in a second. But was there any other martial arts endeavors that you had worked on, published, and released?
No. After 1997, I stopped all the martial arts stuff. Like I said, I just wanted to set it all aside, and I went into the music world as far as profession. I went into the music business, but I just practiced on my own. I had a martial arts school for about 5 years in California while I was publishing the journal, and I shut that down. I moved to Virginia, and I just practiced, and I didn't have any students for a long time. I just raised my kids and did the music stuff, and then practiced all the Ba Gua and Xingyi and Taiji on my own, and I didn't get back to teaching until about 2016.
Okay. Why Virginia? Why did you choose to go out there?
Because I was in the bluegrass music world, and that's kind of the hub, area.
I was thinking
mountain.
exactly that's why. So can you tell us, we've got a lot of international listeners. I'm sure Americans have a better understanding of what bluegrass is, but for the rest of us, what is bluegrass?
Well, bluegrass music is a branch of country music that originated in the mountain areas of Kentucky and Virginia and West Virginia and North Carolina. It's an acoustic music. It was part of country music back in the early days of country music. Then when electric instruments came along and country people started using electric guitars and basses and drums and pedal steel guitars, and the bluegrass people wanted to stay with their acoustic instruments unamplified, and so they sort of split off from the mainstream country and sort of started a thing that was a genre in and of itself, and it's still very much alive and blossoming in the United States. So it's basically an instrument, a music that's rooted in mountain music and country music and old time folk music that still plays with acoustic guitar, banjo, mandolin, bass, fiddle, and resonator guitar sometimes as well. But that's kind of the formula. It's acoustic. They have a lot of festivals, and most of the people that are interested in music also play the music, and they go to campgrounds and they all sit around all night long and play music, and
Nice.
That's kind of what it's all about.
And how did you get into that?
I got into that when I was in high school. I grew up in Virginia, and so it was one of the things that was around. And I got interested in bluegrass music in high school, and then I started to play guitar when I was in college. And so I was doing all that even before I started doing martial arts.
Yeah. All right. And is it very popular? Is it it's more of a niche kind of a genre? And
It is a niche, but the popularity ebbs and flows. It just depends on if there's a movie out that has bluegrass music in it. Sometimes it'll get more popular, and and it waxes and wanes in popularity, but it's pretty solid. I mean, it was sort of originated in the mid 1940s by a guy named Bill Monroe that played on the Grand Ole Opry, and it's stayed fairly strong since then. It's had its ups and downs, but it's pretty strong. The magazine I edit right now, it's called Bluegrass Unlimited magazine. It's been in publication since 1966.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long-running magazine, and I've been the editor of that for the last 4 years.
Is it a print? Is it still distributed in print?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh wow! I mean, that's pretty rare because even things like I think like the Wushu Kung Fu magazine in the States, etc., they don't print anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it's rare to have a print magazine, but we still print it. Yep.
Well, that's good. Maybe that actually is in line with the mentality of bluegrass music that you kind of just you just touched on. So that could be the mentality of the people that are, well, I prefer to have an actual thing in my hands, which is similar to mine. Right. So I want to talk a little bit about your own personal training and practice. Over the years, you've learned from many people, and what stands out? What do you like to practice yourself, etc. Over the years, has it changed?
Sure. I mean, like I said, in the early years, I was just trying to learn as much as I could and be exposed to as much as I could and talk to and train with as many people as I could when I went to China. I would say my main teacher in China was Liang Kechuan. Okay. I really liked Liang Kechuan, and I visited with him every time we went there. We spent a lot of time with him, and so the Xingyi I do is from him. And Ba Gua, I kind of like I do the Sun style, and I do the Liang Zhenpu style and some of the Gao style. Usually I'll start my students with Sun style because it's very direct. It's very straightforward. It's not complicated as some of the others in its motions or its system. And so I start them with Sun style Ba Gua, and then I move on to the Liang Zhenpu Ba Gua. Right. I have a few students now that have been through the Sun form, both the open hands form and the Jibin Gong and the sword form. And so now they're working on, Ding Shi and Ba Gua Zhang from Liang Zhenpu system.
Right.
So yeah, and then later if they get through that, we'll go into some of the Gao style stuff. But and then for Taiji, I teach the Sun style Taiji, and I teach Yang style. I study with Yang Zhendo, and that's who Christopher Pei's teacher was. And my first trip to China, Yang Jun he went on the whole trip with us, and we studied with Fu Zhongwen in Shanghai, and we studied with Yang Zhendo in Beijing. And so that Yang style from Yang Zhendo is what I teach. And I teach a free class twice a week through the Parks and Rec of the city I live in, Columbia, Missouri. So on every Wednesday I have a Sun style class, and every Thursday I have a Yang style class.
Would you say that there's a lot of interest from people for Ba Gua or Taiji or Xingyi more?
Like everywhere else, most people know about Taiji, and my Taiji class is mostly retired people. It's older people. I teach a class for 2 hours every Saturday that's more for people more interested in combat arts, not just something for health. And so we will do the Ba Gua and the Xingyi. And I have Tim Cartmel comes in about once a year, and I have one of Vince Black's students come in a couple times a year. And then Tom Bizio is going to come down. And so whatever they're going to teach, that's what I prepare the students for, So we'll go back and forth. Right now we're working on Li Gui Chang's Xingyi from Shanxi. Yeah. And so because Tom was going to come down and teach that, but he had to postpone. So Tim Cartmel is going to come in September and run through some of that. So we're working on that right now with my students. So when Tim comes, they'll have a foundation in it, and we'll do some of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it moves around a little bit. We'll do Ba Gua for a while and Xingyi for a while. We'll go back and forth between the two.
Well, that's great. And in your own personal practice, do you have a personal affinity for any one of the practices more than the other?
I'll stick with something for a while, and maybe it just I do what the mood hits me. I'm a person that's always loved just basic exercises, this repetitive basic stuff.
Yeah.
And so just basic circle walking, like a eight mother palms or a Dingshi kind of thing, I love to do. And I love to do just, basic five element Xingyi. And I just love taking a lot of time and going through the basic stuff because I think that's important stuff and you can't go wrong,
Yeah. The eight, the 定式巴掌 of Liang style, the eight
Yeah,
fixed body, static
yeah.
body palms. I mean, I use that as the first, when I'm doing, like, I'll alternate between Xingyi and Ba Gua days just so I can make sure that
Okay.
I'm giving enough attention to each one. And
Yeah,
I'll use the Ding Shi obviously as in a similar way that we use Shanti Shi and the other Zhuang practices in Xingyi.
sure,
So I'll use
sure.
that as, and I'd always try to do, each of the eight, in eight revolutions in each direction. But people
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
realize when you do that with the correct intention and structure and focus, how tiring it is and how long
Oh,
it takes just to do those 8 times 8 on each side times 8 in total. It takes so long. And you
yeah.
sit and wonder, like, and I'm looking at it from a Liang Zhenpu, background. The system has got so much content to give it enough attention that it deserves. You
Yeah.
basically have to dedicate 3 hours a day. I mean,
It's a lot.
yeah, it's not easy. There's just so much there. So it also speaks to the generation of life today and the generations past and priorities and lifestyles, and it's interesting to see how this will carry into the future with the next generation who you have to give a 12-second video to, because if it's any longer than 12 seconds their attention span is gone. So
I know.
it's interesting to see where this is all going to go in the future. Dragon Body, Tiger Spirit, a translation and explanation of the classic text of Xing Yi Quan, is available now. This critically acclaimed work presents, translates, and explains the core classical texts of the art of Xing Yi Quan, many of which have been utilized by other arts, including Taiji Quan, Ba Gua Zhang, and others. Available in hardcover, softcover, and ebook versions. Get your copy today from mushinmartialculture.com or from Amazon. Take your practice to the next level with Dragon Body, Tiger Spirit.
I know. It's yeah, that's true. It takes a lot, and um, a lot of people just don't have the patience for it. So, but hopefully there'll be enough that carry it on. I probably got three or four really pretty dedicated students. So, all the teachers I study with in China, they just said, could you please pass it on? Sun Lutang's daughter Sun Jinyun was like, could you help me keep my father's martial arts going? And so that's why I teach Sun
Yeah.
style Bagua and Sun style Taiji because, I love that woman and I just wanted to do what she asked me to do.
Yeah,
You know?
well, it's partially that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started doing videos, was to kind of document into posterity.
Yeah,
I
that's great.
mean, it's got to continue in some form or the other, even if it's just a visual record for now. I mean, that's what I can do for now. It's one of the reasons why I translated the classics and explained them as well.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. I'm
I
glad you're
mean,
doing.
if I look at my teachers' stuff, everything was handwritten. They didn't have access to technology that we have today. So I'm just trying to use what mediums we have today in the best way possible. So, your journal, as we just said, it's now going close to, it's what, 27 years since you stopped publishing the journal. Do you have any
Yeah.
plans for the journal into the future again?
Well, a lot of people have asked over the years, like you said, you don't like having the things digital, and
No.
they are available digitally, but a lot of people have asked me, can you put them out as a hard copy? Can you do a book like the best of the Ba Gua Journal? Can you, and a lot of people have asked me, can you write like a memoir about your trips to China and the people you met over there? You know, been getting people that have asked me this kind of stuff. So I am going to do something, and I've started working on I'm going to do a series of books that are kind of like the best of the Ba Gua Journal, organized in systems. Like the first book we're working on right now, and Tom Bizio and I are working on this book together, and we've asked you to be involved to help us interview your teacher. And because I met your teacher, Di Goyong, when I was there, but I never got a chance to interview him and do an article about him.
Right.
So what we're doing, it's like this first book, we're taking all the information that was ever put in the Ba Gua Journal about Liang Zhenpu's Ba Gua, and we're reprinting all of those articles, but we're updating them with things that we've learned since then that I didn't know or that Tom didn't know at the time, and we're updating them. We're putting more information, like we're going to put information about your teacher, Di Guoyong. We got an updated interview with Zhao Dayuan. We've got
Nice.
information that Tom has gathered. I met Wang Shitong when I was in Beijing, but I never got a chance to interview him either. And then Tom went back and studied with him, so we got a section on Wang Shitong. We got, we're just trying to take what was in the journal on the Liang Zhenpu system and then
Put it together.
update it and add to it and make it a more modern, updated version, and not just reproduce what's in the journal, which that information, like you said, is 30 years old now. I wanted to not just put out that old stuff. I wanted to update it and include it. I'm going to do an interview with Tom, because I did an interview with Tom 30 years ago this year, in 1994. I published an interview with Tom, and I'm going to do an interview with him now and say, well, what have you learned since the last time I interviewed you, that kind of thing. So we're going to, I've been organizing the chapters, and I sent them to Tom and his wife, Valerie. They've been looking through it and adding comments. And so Tom and I are working on the Liang Zhenpu book together.
Great.
And then after I finish that, I'm going to go to another system like Gao Sheng, and do that with Tim Cartmel, because Tim was involved in the Gao style in Taiwan. And he was with me when we went to Hong Kong to interview the Gao style people in Hong Kong. And then, we worked with the Gao style people in Tianjin. So we're going to put together a big Gao style book, and, and then probably do a Sun Lutang book, and then maybe a Yin Fu style book.
That's great.
If all that works out well, that's what I'd like to do, is take the old information, update it with newer information, revisit some of the people that I interviewed 30 years ago that are still alive today, that kind of thing.
That's great. I mean, I think that's a really great idea, and I'm really looking forward to it. And one of the tragedies is that a lot of those people are gone. I mean, you mentioned Wang Shitong, etc. And even down to like Li Ziming's first group of his 8 original disciples, only 3 are still alive. So,
Only 3.
Yeah.
So it's Zhao Dayuan and Di Guoyong, and who else?
Wang Tong.
Oh, Wang Tong's still there. Okay.
Yeah, it's only those 3 that are still alive, and I mean they're all getting on in age, and knock on wood. But you never know from day to day what's going to happen. So the idea is great, I think, and definitely from connecting the previous work to the future, and then representing it, releasing it in a method that not only new people can get access to, but the people that have the journals or were reading it back then, they'd also want to take a look and get these things. I think it's a great idea, and I like the idea of how you're going to be putting them into style groups, because as you know, even within one style, there's differences in lineages, and sometimes the differences are huge. I mean, I've seen this just visiting different Cheng stylists in Beijing, and they're all, this is what it's hard for people to understand in Ba Gua. They're all legitimate lineages, and they're all directly connected to the original founder of Cheng style in one way or the other, whether it's through Cheng Tinghua's sons or his students, etc. But then you'll see major differences. But there's nothing wrong with those differences, as long as they're not contradicting the principles, they're generally all exactly fine. And this is something that people need to really understand. And I've even seen it in Liang style. I mean, Liang style, for the most part, from Li Ziming, is pretty uniform. But even amongst the disciples of Li Ziming, we have differences. And
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'll speak a little bit about, for example, the three that are still alive, like Di Guoyong and Zhao Dayuan and Wang Tong. Like, if you look at how their practice has evolved in their lifetimes, you can also see that there's a logical evolution to their practice based on what they were focusing on.
Yeah.
So, it's very interesting. Like Wang Tong, for example, his from a young age, he always had a very good level of flexibility, particularly in pubu and drop stance, crouching stance, transitions, etc. So you'll
Okay.
see over the years how he'd really focus on presenting that whenever he was displaying Ba Gua. Now, to the casual observer, they'll think, oh, that's how it's supposed to be all the time. But you don't
Right.
understand what the guy is doing. And this is where the
Right.
nuance of learning with a person comes in, etc. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. I think that,
Yeah, I think Ba Gua is very much a principle-based art, and I think it's, I've said before, it's like the improvisational jazz of martial arts. It's like, you got to create in the moment, and you have to transform and change, and it's not always going to look the same by everybody, but as long as it's adhering to the principles of the art, it's Ba Gua.
exactly so. Exactly so. So, and like we just spoke about earlier, there's so much content when you get into these systems. Gao style is another system that has, like, over generations become massive. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
you, I don't know if you've seen or heard the interview that I did with a guy out of Taiwan called Chang Yu Kai.
Uh-uh.
You should maybe try reach out to this guy.
Okay.
He's a Taiwanese Gao stylist that started his practice in the usual lines that disseminated Gao style in Taiwan, but then he got in connection with the Tianjin group, and over the years he's gone through there. He's published books in Taiwan on Gao style. That's
Huh.
expanded on what was available through the lineages in Taiwan by connecting to the Tianjin lineages, and he's
Okay.
worked with John Groschwitz, who
Yeah, I
published
know
a
John.
Gao. They worked together also on that on the English translation of that Gao style manual as well. So I mean,
Right.
maybe I don't know if you're if you want to contact these people, but I think he's definitely a good resource that you might want to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
tickle his
I
brain a little bit.
will reach
And
out.
his English is great. His English
Who
is
did he
great.
who did he start his Gal style with in Taiwan?
It's a off the top of my head I can't recall. I'd have to go back and
Okay.
listen to but his it is connected to the Zhang Junfeng lineage.
Okay.
So through that group. And yeah, he's an academic, so he's got an
Nice.
academic mind, and he's also involved in sports psychology. So there's a lot of interesting aspects and perspectives that he's got regarding Ba Gua Zhang and its practice on those aspects as well.
Yeah,
So he's
when we're doing the Gal book, I'll reach out to him for sure.
for sure, he's definitely so, and I think he has a small group in the States because if I recall, he did his postgraduate work at some point back in the day in the USA,
Okay.
and he has a small group that regularly calls him. I think once a year, maybe he comes through or goes through, and they do training. So, but listen
All
to
right.
the maybe this a good starting point is to listen to the podcast I did
Yeah,
with him.
I'll listen to the podcast. Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts. I'll go back and listen to that one too.
It's a very insightful, very interesting discussion. He's a very interesting guy. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think now's the time to do what you're saying you're gonna do. It's
Yeah.
back when you were doing the journal. It was like all hands on, traveling two places to get this stuff done, and now we can do this a lot easier, a lot quicker. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a good idea. Are you going to be publishing it yourself?
Yeah, I'll probably publish it myself.
Okay,
And
that's great.
probably, Plum Publications out in Santa Cruz, California. I'm sure they'll help me distribute it.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Debbie,
Debbie.
and
Yeah,
yeah, they're great people, and
yeah, yeah. They're
they're
nice people.
again one of the pillars of Chinese martial arts information in the West,
Yeah,
going back way
oh,
back.
yeah.
So yeah, people don't realize how lucky they are today that they've got this ability at the tips of their fingers back and then. And I was overseas and I was ordering from Plum Publications. I mean, it was even harder
Okay.
for me, with local laws and import taxes and all the nonsense that they try to do. I'd end up spending, all the money I'd saved as a teenager in a year to buy 2 books. It was.
Goodness gracious.
But yeah, and they're still going, so people should support them as much as possible as well.
Yeah, for sure. They're nice folks. I love working with them. My martial arts school was in California back in the day, and I was only about an hour away from where their office was. So I met those folks back a long time ago, and they've always been good people.
Right. Yeah. They're in Santa Cruz, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right, so we've got some interesting things to look forward to. I mean, it sounds like this re-release, re-editing, rebirth of the content of the Ba Gua Journal and all the other things that you're going to be doing is going to be a multi-year kind of project. It's going to take some time to get through.
I'll take my time doing it because I got so much else going on at the same time. But I'm slowly plowing through it, and like I said, I'm going to get some of my friends like Tim Cartmel and Tom Bizio to help me out, and we'll step through it and get it done, and it'll give me something to do in my old age.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's really, really great. Do martial arts as you can do martial arts at each particular point in your life. So,
yeah.
When you can practice more, you practice more, and then later on, if you can write more, write more. I think it's great.
Well, I'm also because people have asked me to write down some of my own experiences, and I never really included any of that in the journal. I'm also including, my personal recollections and experiences with these folks. Like in the Liang Zhenpu book, I'll have a chapter where I just talk about how I met Li Ziming and how I met Zhang Huasun and how I met Zhao Daoyuan and Di Guoyong and Wang Shitong and how what I thought of meeting them and all that kind of stuff.
That's great. If you enjoy the Drunken Boxing Podcast, as well as all the other Mushin martial culture endeavors, please do support us if you can at patreon.com. We have 2 support tiers there that you can pledge to help us continue to do the work that we do and continue to bring you the podcast as well as all our other works. If you would like to make a once-off tip or donation to our endeavors, please visit the link listed in the show notes or scan the QR code here. Thank you to everyone who supports us. Yeah, and I think it's nice to go down memory lane. I'm sure it's going to be enjoyable for you recollecting all of these things, and it's one thing to remember; it's another thing to put it down into words.
Yeah,
so,
I probably met most of Li Ziming's students because shortly after Li Ziming passed away, I was in China and I went to some kind of ceremony at his gravesite, and I think most all of his students were there. So I probably met, just shook hands with most of them anyway.
Yeah, that's it. They were all there. I remember, and this is it's somewhat off flavor to a degree, but after Li Ziming died, a bunch of people appeared over the years saying they were Li Ziming's students, and my teacher would always, he's quite a direct person, he'd say, how come I've never seen you before? And then, oh no, I studied with him. He's like, but where were you when our teacher was sick in the hospital and dying? Where were you when we were burying him? And then there's usually silence. So that's a good indicator of who's who. Is you saw it when you were there at the.
Yeah, I got some pictures from that, all that. So yeah. The other thing I'm doing, like I said, I bring Tim Cartmel in a couple times here. I have a 10-acre farm here in Missouri, and I sort of set it up like a retreat center, and I have a little martial arts school building that I built, and I have little workout areas in the woods and stuff like that. And we have seminars and weekend events, and I'll bring in some of my friends who are good martial artists, and that's another thing that we do several times a year. So we always enjoy that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's really cool. You're making me jealous with what you have there. So, but I think that's great. Use it in that way. That's the best way you could use it.
You're at Ba Gua Ground Zero there.
Yeah, but it's different though. Like we spoke about. You spoke to the older generation's teachers that were so keen with Westerners because they know that it's dying out here, and it's so true. Like after my teacher's generation, the next generation, even people that would come and train with my teacher, out of the people that would come and train there, it's less than 5% that were serious about it.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part about the mentality towards these practices now. And post COVID and the younger generation, they're not interested at all. So
Yeah.
I don't even know if we could get a place like that here, and if we called even just one of these older generation teachers to teach, how many locals would show up?
Yeah.
I doubt, apart from a few of us older students that were in the arts from a while back, I don't think many people would show up, to be honest. So,
Yeah.
I think right now the West is maybe even more interested in preserving true classical arts than a lot of the people here are, or they're not even interested in it. I've done grappling as well for 10 years now, so
Uh-huh.
I deal with the grappling community here in China quite deeply as well. And I'm one of the older people in it, but I've dealt with people that were my age, and a lot of them are like in their 20s and 30s, and the mentality, even though they know nothing about it, towards Chinese martial arts
Uh,
is not positive. And for me, that's the saddest part about all of it,
yeah, that is. Yeah. Yeah, those guys are right. Maybe it's, when I was there, of course, in the early 90s, that's when China was just transitioning into these foreign uh, companies coming in
Just
and
opening up.
yeah, just opening up. And I would meet with one of these old masters, and there'd be a young guy in the room, and the old guy would introduce me to this young guy. So this is my grandson. He wants to talk to you about maybe doing business with you.
Yeah. I've met so many of these teachers and my kung fu uncles, and their own kids don't practice, and they're not interested in it.
They're
And
not.
it's hard. You can't teach your own kids, contrary to popular belief. It's very hard. You usually send them off to your martial arts brothers.
Right.
So this is another misunderstanding about these arts. Why the Bai Shi, when you get you become a disciple of a teacher, and you literally use the word father for Shifu in there. Why that relationship is so important. It's not just important between you and your teacher, it's a whole family. You've got your brothers and your uncles, and
Right.
these are the people that help you transmit the art to your kids, and vice versa, etc. The cross-pollination between Zhao Daiyuan's students and my teacher's students is so strong for so long. When we want to learn, go deeper into Qina and things like that, he sends us to Zhao Daiyuan. And
Oh, no.
similarly, when Zhao Daiyuan's guys want to go deeper into Xingyi, he sends them to Di Guiyong. So
Okay.
that's always been like the attitude, and people don't understand that. They think it's just like, oh, it goes directly. It's so hard to teach your own kids. Any person will tell you that. It's a different relationship with your own kids. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
yes,
was in Taiwan, and you familiar who Wang Bonian is?
yes, Huang
He
Guan,
wrote
yeah,
some books back in the day. He taught at the Nanjing Goshugan.
yeah,
And his son, Ba Gua Zhang, was in Taiwan, and he was a student at that school. And I was interviewing him, and his grandson was sitting at the table just listening very intently as his grandfather was talking about his father.
yeah.
Uh, and I said, "Oh, do you do Chinese martial arts?" He goes, "Oh no, I just like hearing the old stories. I play
Yeah.
baseball."
Play baseball.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, hopefully at some point they get this, and they sometimes do. They get this, especially if they're boys.
yeah.
They'll get this kind of guilt at a later age that they've got to carry on the family tradition.
Oh,
Sometimes, it's not often, but then they'll go off and seek an uncle to learn from. But at times it's too late,
yeah,
It's
yeah.
at times too late. So yeah, Huang Baiyan is what I think he's written he's written a couple of books on saber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got them somewhere. Yeah. So yeah. And what was your like? I mean, we I don't know how much time you have, but I wanted we didn't really get into your experiences in Taiwan and what that was like.
Well, I really enjoyed going to Taiwan because, Loda Show we met with a lot because Tim Cartmel, Bill Tucker were studying with him. Mark Brinkman was there studying with him. I think you did a podcast with Mark also.
I did.
And that's where Vince's lineage was from, with his teacher. And we met with Hong Yi Shang and Hong Yi Men, and I met with Zhang Jun. It was, and I had studied with Ken Fish, who was part of that whole lineage as well. So that was interesting to me because I had so many connections with that. Because back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, that's the only place people were getting Chinese martial arts was coming out of Taiwan. So in my generation, I'm 64 years old now. So in my generation, the guys that I knew that were about my age, that's where the Chinese martial arts was coming from, is out of Taiwan. And so that was always interesting to explore the things that were going on there because, we'd read about it in Robert Smith's books, and I got to meet a bunch of those folks or students of those folks that Robert Smith wrote about. And so that was really interesting, meeting all those people and talking to them. And then, of course, Tim and Bill lived there, so they were good hosts and good chaperones and good translators. And so it was always a pleasurable trip to Taiwan. And then I went there the first time I went by myself, and then the second time Vince Black, and the third time Vince Black and I went together. And Vince had been there a bunch as well, studying with Xu Hongji. So, I interviewed other of Xu Hongji's students like Mike Bingo, who was Xu Hongji's first American student. And so, it was always interesting talking to all those folks about that. And, I talked to students of Wang Shujin. I talked to Gong Bao Zai, just different people that were studying there that were from, were from mainland China and then left during the Civil War.
Yeah. Wang Shujin's memorial grave is behind Li Ziming's memorial grave next to Dong Haichuan's grave.
Oh, wow.
So, I actually did a video that I filmed at the height of the insanity of COVID. I decided I need to film this because who knows what the hell's going on or going to happen. I went to the cemetery and I did a little video on Dong Haichuan's grave. So I'll send you a link. You can take a look.
I was there back, I went there pretty much every year that I went to Beijing. I went and visited Dong Haichuan's grave, and I took close-up photos of all the steles that are there, and sort of had them interpreted and got the list of students and all that kind of stuff. And then I think Gogumin's there too, right?
Yeah. Liang Zhenpu, and next to him is Guo Gumin, and Liu Xinghan is next to that.
Oh, Liu Xinghan's there too. Awesome.
Yeah. So if my video that I put up, I you can take a look at all of those people.
Oh, I'd like to see it. It's been 30 years. 30 years since. So I'm sure other people were added.
They renovated it last year. So
nice.
Li Ziming's daughter, Li Shuren, got some money together and they did some painting and whatever. But it's still, and like some of the tablets, they put glass in front of them so they don't get worn down by it. Because the weather in Beijing, if anybody knows summer and winter, how different the weather is, it's extremes. That stuff deteriorates really, really quickly. It actually needs annual upkeep. And But anyway, they did some painting and some touching up last year. Next week is Qingmingjie, or the week after. Anyway, it's in the next week or two, which is the Tomb Sweeping Festival. So usually we go there. I'm sure we'll be there again this year.
Okay. I'll watch your video because it's been so long since I've been there. It's probably been added to.
Yeah. So you can take a look at all of that and see who's around there. Also, did you go visit Wang Xiangjai's grave in the cemetery there?
I didn't.
It's a lot of people don't know it's in the same cemetery.
I didn't know he was in the same cemetery.
Yeah, he's in another section because the cemetery is arranged in 5 elements like Jin Shui Mu Huo Tu, water, metal, earth, etc. So he's in another section, but he's there. He's in the video as well, so you can take a look at his.
I'd like to look at that for sure.
So I'll send that through to you.
Nice.
Well, it's been great talking. I'm really looking forward to the things that you're going to be presenting and releasing. As I said, whatever you need my help with, I'm here. So and we'll get all of that done. So
Yeah, I'll be
looking
in
forward
touch. Sure. I'll talk to you. I'm going to get together with Tom, and we can come up with some questions that maybe you could ask Di Goyong,
No problem.
and that would be awesome. Yeah.
No problem at all. I don't know also if you saw recently, I did a series of videos with an interview I did with Li Ziming's daughter.
Okay.
So that might be useful. She is, bless her cotton socks. She does, if you tell her to talk, she will talk the hind leg off a donkey. So I went there just thinking I sent her like 5 questions that I had like planned previously, and I thought, okay, we'll make a little video about Li Ziming and her experiences. It's her father, etc. And I thought, maybe 30, 40 minutes. We'll take a look around her little museum that she set up there.
Right.
Well, I ended up filming until my batteries of both my microphone and my cameras were completely depleted because she didn't.
Gosh.
So that was 2 hours. So I split it up into quite a few videos, and it's a hell of a thing to translate because firstly she talks so much and second she talks so quickly. But
Yeah.
I did finally finish all. I think it's five episodes in total. So
Oh my
that might be something. Just if you want to get some insight and some background into some aspects of Li Ziming.
Is that on your website also?
It is. It's on YouTube. So I'll send you these links in when I'm done here, just separately, so it's easier for you to take a look at, because it might help you with whatever you're doing with the Liang Zhenpu stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, it's been great. Any contact details you want to release to the public, I'll get them from you afterwards, and I'll put them in the show description here on YouTube, etc. And then we'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it. It's been fun, and I'll be in touch with you as well.
All right. Thanks for your time today. Have a great evening.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Okay,
Bye.